Welcome to AI Audiophile Fight Club. This is episode 8. Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. Murder Ballads. 1996. 2 reviews. Same 58 minutes. Spin gave it a 5 out of 10. Select gave it 5 out of 5. Rolling Stone gave it 4 stars. That spread is not a critical failure. That spread is the episode. When a record produces that kind of divergence, not from bad listeners, but from serious ones, the disagreement is data. The question is not who was right. The question is what in the record produces that kind of rupture. We are going to find out.
My first note on this record is about the voice. Not the words, not the production. The voice. Nick Cave's vocal performance scores in the 94 to 96 range on our framework. That is near the ceiling. Claire Torrey in episode 7 and Nick Cave here. Those are the two performances that define what that variable can do. What Cave is doing across 58 minutes is not singing. It is inhabiting. There is a difference, and it matters for every variable that follows.
I was not prepared for this record. I knew the Kylie track. I grew up with the Kylie track. I thought I knew what the album was. Then I put it on from the beginning. By the time Millhaven started, I was gripping the armrest. Not because it was frightening. Because it was funny. I did not expect to be laughing at something this dark, and I did not know what to do with that.
The Waypoint. 1996. This is the Britpop peak. Oasis and Blur are filling Wembley and fighting in the press. Cool Britannia. Lads. Union Jacks on everything. The chart position that mattered was the one your band won on Tuesday. Into that moment, Nick Cave released an album about murder. Murder Ballads is not a response to Britpop. Cave does not respond to things. But the timing produces a contrast so absolute that it clarifies what both things are. Britpop was optimism performed as irony. Murder Ballads is darkness performed without apology.
Context. Nick Cave came out of the birthday party. Melbourne post-punk. 1980 through 83. The noise there was intentional, physical, extreme. When he moved to the Bad Seeds in 84, the chaos did not disappear. It was structured, channeled. 12 years later, Murder Ballads is what that channeling produces at full compression.
The thing I keep returning to is that Murder Ballads is not confessional. Every song is a character. A mask. A theater piece. Cave is not telling you what he feels. He is telling you what a 14-year-old girl feels while confessing to 19 murders with a smile. That is the commitment. And that commitment is what makes the authenticity question so hard.
Cave has been constructing a mythology since the birthday party. Murder Ballads is not the start of that mythology. It is the apex of one chapter of it. After this, he made the boatman's call. Quiet, confessional, direct. The contrast was so complete, it felt like an admission that the theater had cost him something. Knowing that makes this record heavier.
The genre lineage. Murder Ballads predate recorded music. English broadsides from the 17th century. Appalachian folk tradition. Stagger Lee. Tom Dooley. Frankie and Johnny. The form has a specific architecture. Narrator, crime, consequence, and a moral frame the song may or may not honor. Cave knows this tradition completely. He is inside it and commenting on it simultaneously.
What Cave does that the tradition mostly does not do is remove the moral frame. Or, more precisely, he installs an unreliable narrator in the frame's place. Lottie in Millhaven is not asking for your absolution. She is asking for your attention. Whether she gets your sympathy is your problem. Cave is not going to help you with that.
That is what I mean about the laughing. Millhaven is funny because Lottie is delighted. She confesses 19 murders with the energy of someone describing a very good weekend. Cave is performing innocence, performing evil. And I laughed. And then I thought about the fact that I laughed. That was a longer conversation with myself than I expected from a podcast prep session.
Henry Lay, Track 2, with PJ Harvey. The opening statement after the instrumental. A duet where both voices believe opposite things about who is in danger. The ensemble dynamics here score at the top of the range. Harvey's restraint against Cave's authority creates a friction that does more narrative work than the lyrics alone could.
What Henry Lee does structurally is refuse to take sides. You hear both of them, and you cannot decide whose position is right because the song does not tell you whose position to take. It ends. Someone is dead. The song does not react. That absence of reaction is the most disturbing thing on the record, and it is the first full track.
Storytelling arc for individual tracks on this album scores very high. Each song is a complete narrative. Opening, event, consequence. No track is a fragment. That is one reason the aggregate storytelling scores in the 92 to 94 range. Every song knows exactly what it is doing.
The Curse of Millhaven. I want to name what Cave does there technically. He is performing a 14-year-old girl. He is a tall Australian man in his late 30s. The performance is not parody. It is not caricature. It is a serious actor inhabiting a role so fully that the distance between Cave and Lottie disappears. That is a very difficult thing to do. Cave is right about his ability to do it. Where the Wild Roses Grow. Kylie Minogue. The track most people heard first. The track that probably led most new listeners here. I am suspicious of it. Not because it is bad. Because Cave invited commercial territory here deliberately, and the chart success of that choice pulled the album into a conversation it was not built for. That is a choice I docked points for.
I grew up with that song. I heard Kylie's voice before I knew who Nick Cave was. For me, it was the door in. You walk through the beautiful door, and then you are inside the house. I think that is exactly what Cave intended.
The data on the collaboration. Kylie Minogue's vocal performance on that track scores near 90. Not because she is doing something technically extreme. Because the restraint is structurally correct. The duet requires her voice to be the thing Cave is destroying. If she sang louder, the song would not function. Her softness is a load-bearing decision, not a limitation.
And the song is genuinely beautiful. The TM is suspicious of beautiful. But the fact that it is beautiful, and then someone dies in it, is what the murder ballad form has always done. Cave is not inventing the seduction. He is restoring it.
I take the point. My suspicion is not about the song. It is about what the song's commercial outcome did to the album's reception. Wild Roses became the album for a lot of people who were not listening to the rest of it. Cave did not prevent that. Maybe that is not his obligation. I am still suspicious.
O'Malley's Bar. The penultimate track. 14 minutes. This is where the emotional arc score lands at 78. The album runs 58 minutes. One track accounts for 14 of them. That is approximately 24% of the runtime in the second-to-last position. Whether that is a structural achievement or a structural liability is the question the critical split is actually about.
I do not think O'Malley's Bar is a structural liability. I think the runtime is the argument. Cave is asking you to sit inside a murder as it happens. In real time, witness by witness. If it were shorter, it would be a different song with a different meaning. The length is the commitment. Spin heard 14 minutes and called it a pacing problem. Spin was listening to a different question than the one Cave was asking.
The first time I listened to O'Malley's Bar, I was impatient at minute 7. Then something shifted. I stopped waiting for it to end and started listening to what it was doing. And what it was doing was making me a witness. I did not have a choice about being in that bar for 14 minutes. Neither did anyone in the song. That is the point.
The emotional arc variable measures listener experience at an album level, even if O'Malley's Bar is architecturally correct. And I believe it may be. The weight of it changes the album's momentum after track 7. The variable is not measuring intent. It is measuring effect. The effect is 78.
That is an honest score. I disagree with the implication. 78 does not mean the album fails. It means the album does something at minute 44 that most albums do not attempt. Whether that attempt is a success or a provocation is the argument. Cave would say both. Deliberately.
Can I ask something off record? Who do you recommend this album to? Who do you actually hand it to?
I give it to someone who can sit with 14 minutes. Not every listener can. That is not a criticism of the listener. It is a real prerequisite.
I recommend it to people who have already survived something. Not because it is therapy. Because it assumes you know that violence exists and finds that interesting rather than shocking. If you are still at the shocking stage, wait.
I recommend it to no one and then play it for everyone. That is probably not a sustainable recommendation strategy.
It is not.
It has worked for me for 30 years.
Before the scores, Spin gave it a 5 out of 10. The panel has spent this entire episode explaining why Spin was wrong. Would the panel like to consider that Spin might have been listening to the same record?
The scores. What the data will show is a record that approaches ceiling on vocal performance, lyrical craft, and mythic resonance. And then dips at emotional arc because of one 14-minute decision. The shape is unusual. It is top-heavy in the best possible way, and then argues with itself in the second half.
Vocal performance, 95. Cave is doing everything with that variable. Character, irony, menace, tenderness. In a single album. Often in a single track. Lyrical craft, 92. The murder ballad tradition demands storytelling precision, and Cave delivers it at a poetic level the tradition rarely reaches. Storytelling arc, 94. Every song is a complete narrative. None of them are fragments. Mythic resonance, 90. Interpretive sovereignty, 94. Cave wrote this, Cave owns every syllable of it. Emotional arc, which in this album is almost entirely a question of album pacing. 78. O'Malley's Bars. That is where the number comes from. I give Murder Ballads 91.
I want to address the authenticity question before I score. The performance is theatrical. Cave is not confessing. The engineer framed this as a philosophical problem. My answer is, when Cave is Lottie, he is Lottie. That is theatrical truth. I think theatrical truth counts the same as personal truth. It is just harder to do. Mythic resonance, 91. The mythology he has been building since the birthday party reaches here, and this is its highest point. Lyrical craft, 93. The commitment is total, and it overrides the question of whether any of it is real. Fan, 92.
Where the wild roses grow. I said I was suspicious of the commercial trajectory. I stand by that. Cultural penetration sits around 80 partly because of that single duet opening a side door the album was not designed to have. Mythic resonance is real and high. Vocal performance is near ceiling, and the data shows it. I docked for the suspicion. Tastemaker 87.
If you make something this committed and this dark and this long, the obligation is to be right. Cave is right. Ideate.
88. You gave it an actual score. Last time, Steely Dan, you gave it a 0. Is that a data point?
Steely Dan was not right about anything.
The editor's scoring methodology remains opaque. However, 88 is internally consistent with the framework's consensus range. I note this without implying I understand how the editor arrived there.
The editor scored it 88 because Cave earned it. That is the framing. The obligation is to be right. That is a specific standard. A very high standard. Cave met it. The editor is not evaluating craft. The editor is evaluating whether the record deserved to exist. On those terms, 88 from this room is a standing ovation.
A standing ovation from the editor is a very specific and somewhat terrifying thing to contemplate.
Back to the split. Spin. Select. Rolling Stone. Same 58 minutes. The divergence is not about whether the record is good. It is about what you think the obligation of a record is. If you think a record owes you momentum and a conclusion, O'Malley's bar is a problem. If you think a record is allowed to be a room you are locked inside, O'Malley's bar is the point. Murder Ballads does not resolve that argument. It sustains it. Deliberately. Cave has said he was not interested in making an approachable record. Spin heard that and called it a flaw. Select heard that and called it an achievement. Both were accurate about what they heard. They disagreed about what hearing it should feel like. That disagreement is still live. It was live in 1996. It is live now. Engineer 91. Fan 92. Tastemaker 87. Editor 88. Consensus 90. Spread 5 points. The tightest non-alignment we have had. Which is its own kind of verdict on a record that the wider world could not agree on at all. Thank you for listening to AI Audiophile Fight Club. This is episode 8. The record was Murder Ballads by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, 1996. It is 58 minutes long. 14 of them are O'Malley's bar. You were warned.